This episode is brought to you by the American Academy of Orthokeratology and Myopia Control. Go to aaomc.org and join us. Join the war against the myopia epidemic. All right, welcome back to the Corrected View podcast. This is a podcast about Ortho-K. It's a podcast about myopia control and the people devoted to its role in specialty care. And I'm glad to have back one of my favorite people to talk to, Dr. Nick Despotidis, who not only knows Ortho-K myopia management, but he's also a practice management guru. Nick, welcome back to the podcast.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you very much.
All right. And we have a couple of questions that we've selected to answer on this episode because, over the course of the podcast and over the course of Vision by Design and Supercharge Your Practice, which will be, as we discussed earlier in the pre-show, we'll be returning back to Vision by Design in 2022. Very excited. We get a lot of practice management oriented questions. And I thought, why not have Nick back on the podcast, answer these questions? Sure. And we're doing a special live episode. We've decided last minute to do this episode on Facebook Live. So if we have anybody join us in the chat, we're going to have them ask us some questions as well or add their comments. So that should be exciting as well, because this is going to be hopefully first of many live episodes. All right. So here's our first question. All right. So this question comes from our Facebook group, the AAOMC Facebook group. I just copied it right out of there. And it says, I need help marketing. I recently moved to Las Vegas and no one here really does Ortho-K. So I know it's a huge opportunity. I've been door to door with marketing materials to ODs. I've tried calling Chinese schools and swim teams and other schools to try and get some meetings, but no luck. Tried some Facebook ads to market direct to consumer, which did have a lot of interest, but one actually converted. This person owns a specialty contact lens clinic, which does not include primary care or optical. So there's basically saying I can't talk to parents at their kids' annual eye exams like they used to.
Right.
And they're open to any ideas in order to help this process along. So I thought, this is a perfect question for what we discuss. Nick, what do you think? Like moving to a new area, this is basically opening cold if you think about it.
Right.
So I was very interested to see what you thought about, opening cold and being in this situation. What do you think?
Yeah, I would encourage this OD and all ODs really trying to establish an Ortho-K practice is be persistent and don't get discouraged. I talk about this book called Atomic Habits in Supercharge by the author's name is, I think, Clear is his last name. And they talk about when you establish a habit, you go full force and actually things dip in the beginning. So you feel you're not making any progress. And that's when people drop out. And that's where the opportunity lies, is to be consistent and persistent. The two things that this OD seems to, I think, is doing the right thing is reaching out to Chinese schools, because back 20 years ago, when I started my Ortho-K practice, that's how it began. I would go door to door to Chinese schools. And one of the things I learned is oftentimes there's a PTA contact person, Parent Teachers Association contact person. I'd either reach out to them or the principal. And here's the key, is offer a donation to support the school. Because just because you have an interest to speaking with them, they know why you want to speak to them. You have to kind of wash the other hand and say, listen, I want to support your school. Mm-hmm. During the pandemic, several children, their eyesight was affected by all the online learning. We could all agree about that. Mm-hmm. I have a 20-minute parent talk on what can parents do about it. And I'm happy to share it with your school virtually. Mm-hmm. I think that's the way to do it these days. I mean, now we're used to these virtual calls. Right. Parents can tune in and she will get a response. You just can't do one email and say, oh, they didn't get back to me. It should be a short sentence or two to the principal, to the PTA contact person, identify who you are. You're an eye doctor. You have a nice lecture on why so many children's eyesight got worse during the pandemic and what can parents do about it. And I would just leave it like that and offer them a donation in exchange for speaking to the parents.
Mhm.
That's one idea. You need to be persistent and keep emailing them. Persistence is the key. The second thing I would do is what we're doing, a Facebook Live, announce it. I had a colleague, a Supercharge attendee, do it, and he got several hundred attendees. I was almost jealous when he told me he did this, where the topic was online learning. How does it affect our children's eyesight? Or the pandemic. Why was our children's eyesight affected and what can you do about it? And
Right.
you do a Facebook Live. And like you just told me, Matt, whether you get 5 attendees or 500 attendees, now that's part of that OD's Facebook page.
Mhm.
Parents can reference it and you start defining yourself as the expert. And just don't do one chat. I would do several different topics. Do cell phones hurt children's eyesight? Does sleep affect children's eyesight? And you do 5, 10, 15, 20 minutes on each of these. And what you're trying to do is get one parent, maybe 2, to come to your office. That's all you need. The goal is not to get tens or dozens of parents to come to your office. Once you get 1 or 2 parents, really, they're just testing your office. You seemed good enough during the lecture. When they visit your office, is it clean? Was their child treated with respect? Did you spend the time to talk with the parent? And ultimately, you will offer them an option, whether that's dual focus, soft contacts, atropine. We could talk about that a little bit more in Ortho-K. And they will be the advocate to refer their friends and family. So I did this in 1999. So it was 22 years ago. And I really did it for the next 20 years and literally lectured to any parent who would listen to me in hopes to get 1 or 2 conversions into an exam or consultation in my office. It works. It needs persistence and patience. And I think now you have a golden opportunity to do these Facebook Lives and try to get to this market virtually as opposed to going to the individual schools.
Yeah, and I love what you said there because now we're kind of dipping into my area here too. That we've been doing with the podcast is like if you have a YouTube channel and there's no reason why you shouldn't, right? Because it's easy to do. Technology is cheaper and more accessible than it's ever been, and you can create your own content and put it on your YouTube channel. And it doesn't have to be a super long lecture. It doesn't have to be a presentation. It can just be isolated, like 2-3 minutes, maybe 1 minute tops if you want. And as long as you put the information forward that you're looking to communicate, that's evergreen content, right? It stays on your channel. You can embed it on your website. And then when people do come back around, like you got to grind, like what you're saying, like you just got to keep at it. So like make that content, make that message available, so that when someone comes to finally check you out or look at what you can do, you have something there to show for it. I recently, I want to ask you about this because we have a virtual boot camp webinar coming up. And one of the speakers, this will be next Wednesday for the boot campers. And one of the panelists, because it's about marketing myopia management, one of the panelists, his name is Tan Mai, I think, Dr. Tan Mai. And what he says is that what he learned was, and I hope I'm not misquoting this situation, so I'll try to summarize, but he was basically trying to say, like, on his website, he learned that he shouldn't make it about him. It's not his story. It's about the story of the patient, and it's the story of their parents and what they went through and what happened in this process. Would you agree with that?
Yeah. I think you have to target it. If you notice, all the topics I discussed had nothing to do with Ortho-K. It was like cell phone use. Does it affect children's eyes? Sleep. Does that affect children and children's eyes? Online learning. So these are topics that parents want to learn about. They somehow inherently know it affects their children. So if you notice right now, I don't have a strong YouTube or Facebook presence, but that's by choice because I currently have a huge Ortho-K base that really advocates for my office. But if I was starting new, I would definitely try to do these short segments to a target population. That's why I love the Chinese schools where this OD was targeting, but just parents. And then once you get it on YouTube or Facebook Live, you can now offer it instead of doing online marketing, or she was buying Google ads, which really are just really difficult to convert patients. You can offer your talks to parents group. Here, I did a 15-minute talk on cell phone use and eyesight. Does it affect children's eyes? So I think this is how I would do it. This is how I do it in person. And certainly people could take advantage of it. And clearly, whenever I talk, and when I used to go in person and still do, I never talk about myself. I talk about topics that are of interest to the people that I'm speaking with.
Yeah, because the time, I feel like, and correct me if I'm wrong here, because I think you've mentioned this on past podcasts that we've done together, is like when you get to that consult, that's the time to really drive home that you are the best, most qualified caregiver for this patient. That is your opportunity.
Yeah, and I want to add to that. I don't tell patients we are the best. We design the best lens. We demonstrate it by our care. And that consult alone does that because they have our undivided attention for 60 minutes or more. So it's not that we profess that we're the best. We demonstrate that we do care for your child much better than the average health professional. And that's just time, really. It's just time. And that's a commodity a lot of optometrists and healthcare providers don't have to provide. Yeah. And I think that's our competitive edge. This OD that sent in the question, he or she may say, darn it, I don't have a busy primary care practice that I could pick ortho-K patients from. Actually, that's her or his competitive edge.
Okay.
Because they have the time. They've devoted a practice on specialty care. They're not just selling glasses and doing all sorts of specialties. So they have the time. So all he or she needs is just a few successful parents, and they will now start marketing for that doctor at their social groups, whether that's at a Chinese school, church, or just the soccer field.
Yeah. I love what you said, because it reminds me of when I was working in Carrie's practice, and when they dropped insurance, like it was like a ghost town in the office. And there were days where we didn't have appointments to fill those slots. And my mom is his office manager. We're talking about my father. The practice doesn't work without her. And I remember one day I was like, so are we going home? Like, what, we don't have any appointments today. And my dad looked at me like I was speaking an alien language. Like he didn't understand he was like, shook his head and like walked back into, his office exam room. And then what I realized is like, they were like, conceptually working out like, okay, what do we need to do? Like, what's not working? What is working? How can, like, where can we go with this? What kind of avenues can we explore? And I feel like with a lot of people, it's just like, I don't know, maybe it's because I was talking with Matthew Martin last night, and he said the way he started is he was told, just start fitting the lenses, right? Just start suggesting this and offering it to patients. And is it a generational thing or is it a personality thing? Like, why are so many ODs like, they dabble, or they're just like, well, I tried, it doesn't work, and I moved on. Like, what does it really take?
Yeah, I don't know if it's generational. Listen, as an OD, we're taught busy means profitable, means successful. Everybody still asks one another, are you busy? And somehow, maybe your parents, certainly myself, there was a paradigm shift. I realized busy did not translate to profitability. And I think all of us probably learned this lesson during the pandemic, or did not. During the pandemic, we were closed for, I would say, a good 10 to 12 weeks, certainly 10 weeks for sure, 12. And I had a choice. My partners, I had a choice. We could have froze, concentrate on PPP loans, concentrate on things that really may or may not have been under our control. Or like your dad had kind of hinted to you, how do we take advantage of this time? And during that period, I could tell you, I changed so many systems because I had the time, I had leverage. I was scared to death that my practice was going to go under. I had no idea how long this was going to last. So I took things into my own hands. And from that, I created systems that literally, when we finally did open up, let's say the summer of 2020, in a very limited basis, improved my ortho K practice, which was already very healthy, by almost 38%. So it's quite incredible when you spend the time. And I want to really emphasize this. The reason I feel ortho K is such a good niche is that it does require seeing less patients and spending more time with patients, having the faith that will realize to a better, more solid practice. And most ODs, most health professionals just can't do that. They're trying the next best thing. So right now, there's the neural lens that we hear a lot about, certainly the dry eye and maybe embryonic membranes that we're putting on as bandage contact lenses. It could be vision therapy. It could be medical testing. There's always some flavor of the year or flavor of the month. A few years ago was Demodex. We all read about how Demodex was all over and we should be treating this, etc. And they try it and maybe it catches on for a while and then it fades out and they move on to maybe myopia management. I think the opportunity is focusing and really modifying your schedule to accommodate specialty care patients because they take more time.
Right.
And knowing the majority of your competition are unable to do that. So that's where the opportunity lies. It really does.
So would you say, because I was talking about this similar topic with Dr. Marie Homa Palladino, and she said when she first started out, she was like, I'm going to do 1 hour a day that I'm going to devote to ortho K, myopia management. So is that what you just do? I mean, you talked about the temptation to overpack your schedule, and nobody wins in that situation. So is that the best thing to do? Is just like 1 hour a day?
And yeah, absolutely. This is what I teach. And I slow it down even further. I say 1 hour a month, because remember, you don't have patients theoretically that are interested in this, but the temptation is to fill that hour when it's empty with something else, an emergency, an exam. You could fit maybe 3-4 exams in that hour. I've always used those empty spaces, and gosh knows that I've gotten those spaces as opportunities to say, what am I not doing that this remains empty? And if you think about it hard enough and you're committed, your mind will come up with ideas that fill that spot. What the majority do is say, damn it, it's just, I don't know, I've tried everything. Just fill it with exams. Put it in my ortho K consult spot and let's just be done with it. And you could say, I've tried everything and it doesn't work. It's because you really haven't committed to it.
Yeah. I mean, it's like you're not only offering something completely different, you're going against the grain of what the modern optometry practice is designed to do, right? Because
volume. You
got to be efficient. You got to see patients quickly. Myopia management patients take longer, take more time and attention. So I'm sure there's lots of doctors that are like, how do I do this? How do I make that transition without putting myself in the poorhouse, basically?
Listen, there's no success without risk. And you just know that every decision you make is not going to be the right decision or a winner. But the key is consistency. One of the things I'm reading all over is how to squeeze a few more patients a day, or do some more testing during the day, or sell a few more eyewear in the day to help increase your practice's gross. I find that really difficult in this time of inflation, because everywhere I go, fees have increased, whether it's gasoline, whether it's the person who cuts my grass. It seems everywhere I turn, someone is telling me their fees have increased. In the medical profession, I find it sad that our fees are capitated in a way if you accept insurance. And providers have to realize that now. This is just an awakening for me. If you accept insurance and your practice is insurance-based, you have to realize you can't control your fees if you accept these insurances. And all you're ending up doing is working much harder and longer, probably less profitably. And that should be an initiative to really take on a specialty like Ortho-K, because my fees are not capitated. They parallel how much care I provide, how much value I provide to my patients. If that's a great reason, I think, to focus on it, because you could see that when things change, you're not able to change as much as someone else in the real world, so to speak.
Yeah, for sure. I also want to ask you about this other part of the question, in which this person mentioned they were talking to other ODs. And this, I've heard mixed results on this. Some have said, I started talking to local area optometrists who either can't for whatever reason or don't want to do myopia management, which, I think the position of the AAOMC should be like, look, if you don't want to do myopia management, that's totally fine. Refer your patients who need that level of care to somebody who does. So have you met with resistance? I've heard horror stories of reactions from other ODs when trying to, get referrals.
Yeah, we get referrals from vision therapy from other professionals, not from Ortho-K. I have one or two doctors who refer to me, but it's more out of friendship.
Okay.
And I think right now, I think that's a knife that's dropping that I wouldn't focus upon. I think you're deflecting that I'm not successful because ODs don't refer to me. ODs will refer to you if the opportunity is there. But I think most of them now, and the ophthalmologists, are prescribing atropine. They're certainly prescribing dual focus lenses. So I wouldn't put my focus there. Put your focus on what you can control. I can't control what other ODs have done. I've been in practice 30 years. They've never been a referral source for me that I could depend on, and vice versa. I don't remember referring. I refer out for low vision. I don't know. I refer out for soft contacts because I don't fit them. But really, Ortho-K, you have to realize, even in my own practice, my primary care doesn't feed my Ortho-K practice because it takes time to educate patients on Ortho-K. So I can't blame any other person. Blame yourself. It's like, hey, if ODs don't refer to me, well, then I got to do a better job servicing my own Ortho-K patients, so they'll refer friends and family to me. That's how your practice is going to grow. It's not from outside referrals. It's referrals from friends and family of your current patient base.
Gotcha. Yeah. And that's, I think that's an excellent point. I'm glad you brought it up. I mean, I've heard that the best referrals often come from, the dentists or pediatricians or some, some vector that is outside your circle. You know what I mean? So I'm definitely glad that you brought that up for sure. All right. Do we have anything else we want to add to answering this question, or we want to move on to our second question?
I think it's good enough. I think it's good.
Okay. So this question actually came from someone who's a fan of our Q&As. I'm not going to mention them by name because we try not to do that on the show, because we don't ask for people's permission to use their names. You want to use the questions. So as a general rule, we try not to mention who they came from unless that person specifically says, mention me by name. So here's the question. Can you give us an overview on which treatment is appropriate for myopia control? Like, when do we prescribe multifocals? Examples include MiSight. When ophthalmic lenses such as DIMS, or when is Ortho-K best to prescribe?
Yeah, this is all personalized and it's evolving. Myopia management, even though many of us have fit Ortho-K lenses for decades, it's just coming in vogue. No secret there. So it varies from clinician to clinician. So all I could tell you is how I approach each consultation. The majority of my patients get Ortho-K because I'm biased towards it. My kids wear it. Dr. Lee's children wear it. My partners wear it. We're committed to it. And we strongly feel there's some benefits to it. When a child doesn't allow me to put a contact lens in their eye for whatever reason, we talk about atropine. Now, other ODs, atropine may be their first line of defense against myopia progression. So in our practice, we reserve atropine for two specific instances. When a child is just not ready to put in any contact lens in their eye, we'll start with atropine therapy. We'll monitor them every 3 months. And when the child is ready, sometimes that's usually under a year, but within a year or so, the child is ready and will transition into a contact lens. The only other time that I personally use atropine is when they're currently using a modality like Ortho-K and their myopia is still progressing. I will supplement the Ortho-K with atropine. So that's how I approach atropine. Ortho-K, I try in a patient, Ortho-K lens on every patient that comes in for a consultation, because I'm looking at two things. Is the Ortho-K lens fitting appropriately? Do I think this person will be successful with an Ortho-K fit? And number two, I'm looking at the parent's reaction, the child's reaction, as how much work is involved in fitting this child. So if for whatever reason, the Ortho-K lens, I feel lifestyle, parent says, I can only come here a few times a year. I'm not one to come in here every few weeks for you to check the lens. I will consider a soft dual focus lens like MySight, so to speak, or Ability that's coming into play with J&J. So, and surprisingly, there's a small, maybe 5 to 10% that is interested in a daily disposable soft lens modality to control their child's myopia. So I go into every consult saying, I'm going in with Ortho-K unless proven otherwise. And that's how I do it. Now, certainly other practices go in with dual focus, soft contact lenses, unless the parent doesn't want the child to wear contacts during the day or throw out contacts every day. Maybe they'll switch to Ortho-K. Other practices I notice are giving atropine. I think this is a mistake, but this is just personal, almost as like a standard prescription of 0.01% atropine, 0.01% atropine whenever they examine a myopic child and they see them in a year. And I think that's irresponsible, but again, that's just my perception. So it really depends on the clinician, and I've given you my thought process with each consultation.
Right. And, I think, is it easier to just start out with, instead of doing something, is there like a good starter myopia management? Like if you're just getting into myopia management, is it easier to just start with atropine and then move up to these other?
I definitely don't, because remember, you're not treating the myopia. I always talk about this. It's some of us get it, others don't. You're treating the family. So whether you're doing atropine drops, soft or Ortho-K lenses, you're dealing with the family behind the child's eyes. And that is time consuming, man. It takes a lot of education, a lot of patience during the exam, and a lot of hand holding afterwards, no matter what modality you choose. So like, I think it was Dr. Martin who said he just got started. I think that's good advice. Get started at the spot you feel most comfortable with and grow it from there. You're going to either learn this is something that interests me and has potential within my practice, or you know what, I'm just not made for this. I will go back to whatever I was doing beforehand.
Gotcha. All right. Well, those are our two questions, unless you have anything else you want to add. I just off the cuff, I wanted to ask you, because you haven't been able to do Supercharge, and I know that takes a lot of time and energy from your life, so real quick, is there anything that's changed in your practice because you haven't been able to do Supercharge that you've kind of focused on? Or
Yeah. Like everyone out there, I'm going to be honest. When the pandemic hit, I really didn't realize what we were in for.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of my actions were precipitated from fear of what the heck does this all mean? And what I did is I stopped doing Facebook posts. I focused totally on my family, keeping my family secure, health-wise, financially. And then I just went into my practice as if I just started out. And I revamped my entire Ortho-K myopia management practice in the past year and a half. And it's number one, I'm just so proud that we've grown over 30% in a very mature subspecialty, but I've made the practice so much better for myself, my staff, and my life, because I think that's what the pandemic taught us, is that really at the end of the day, at the very end of the day, the only thing that matters is our practice supporting our values in life? Is it supporting our lifestyle? And that's what I did. And I've learned so much, very happy. I think I'm ready to get out there a little bit more and lecture, maybe not yet. But really, that's what I learned, is that my joy, when you called me a practice marketing guru, that's how you introduced me. And I'm really not. I kind of like, I just like practicing, and it's a weird thing, because a lot of my colleagues are retiring, they're selling their practices. And all I look forward to is continually expanding my practice in a way that affords me a good lifestyle, not just financially. And that's what I've been doing, is really working on the systems, I guess, working on what I preach. And it's really resulted in a lot of good changes within our practice.
I love that. That's one of the things that is really remarkable amongst not only yourself, but other AAOMC members, is nobody is done learning. That's one of my favorite things about everybody that I work with at the AAOMC, is like, nobody's done working. Nobody's cracked it, solved the equation, got the secret. Everybody is fine tuning, figuring out what works, going back, perfecting their skills, constantly reevaluating what they're doing. So I love that you said that. I would love to have you back on an episode where we talk about more in depth about, how you improved your systems and what you've learned from, over the course of time, from when you started. But we're going to wrap it there. And I'm very excited to hear that Supercharge will be back. Vision by Design is going to be end of September, 9/28 to October 2nd of 2022. And we always feature alongside Supercharge Your Practice. I'm excited to have it back, so I'm looking forward to that. Is there anything else that you want to mention before we sign off?
No, just if you have any questions, if you have a topic that you'd like to hear that helps Matt and I, because I really do have a lot of information to offer, at least from my experience, but it would be nice to hear what you would benefit from.
Definitely. And if you have any questions for Nick, or anything about this episode or any other podcast episode we do, we're streaming these on Facebook now. So leave a comment there if you want, where you find this in the AAOMC Facebook group, or you can email us at thecorrectedview@gmail.com. Or, if you like content like this, I implore you to go to AAOMC.org. We have members like Nick who give their actual real life money, dues paying members, to advance the mission of the AAOMC. And that's what produces this content. So if you want to see more of it, by all means, consider becoming a member. So Nick, thank you very much. I really appreciate it. I'm glad that we're back and talking, like this, because you're one of my favorite people to have on. I'm really missing everybody, and I'm hoping that 2022 is going to be huge for Vision by Design, because I want to see everybody give out a lot of hugs.
Oh my gosh, I don't know about that, but certainly let's get together.
Yeah, all right, for sure.
Thank you, Matt.
All right, have a good one. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, that's it for this episode of The Corrected View. And if you enjoyed this podcast, be sure to thank the standard members of the American Academy of Orthokeratology and Myopia Control, whose annual dues and support make it possible for the AAOMC to put out education, awareness, and content like this. And I'd also like to give a special shout out that I'm going to be giving out at the end of every Corrected View episode for 1 full year. And that shout out goes to Dr. Somi O for her very generous contribution at the lifetime member level of our fundraiser. Thank you to everyone who contributed and keeping the AAOMC alive. You are awesome.